I'm Robin and welcome to Molten Modular. Today we're looking at the Function Junction from Cre8audio. The Function Junction is a multifunctional modulation device. When you use the word function, it automatically throws up the idea of maths, of the make noise maths. We all have one of those. We all have one of those sitting around in our rack somewhere that we don't ever use because we've never really quite understood exactly what it is that it does. The Function Junction does a bit of that, grasps in some of that, but does it in a far groovier, far simpler, far more straightforward way that's fun and engaging and means you can actually do stuff rather than just scratch your head and wonder what it is that you're not quite getting. The Function Junction has a loopable ADSR. It has a loopable function generator thingy. It has an LFO at the bottom, and it also has some kind of strange mixing, blending, malting thing that's a lot simpler than it sounds. And so very quickly you can be enveloping the sound of something, you can be functioning the heck out of a filter while modulating that and also mixing waveforms together in interesting and unexpected ways. You have voltage control over the depth of modulation, over the looping, whether that starts or stops, and you can throw that attack and that rise and that fall in all sorts of different ways from a single LFO. Meanwhile, there's a whole load of patch sockets over here that throw out mixes of stuff from within it or mixes of stuff that you plug in it. So it's fabulously versatile as well as looking flipping awesome in anybody's rack. So I'm going to unhinge this from this alarming floating place and put it back in the rack so we can get in close and have a look at exactly what it does. The Function Junction then. It has 3 or rather 4 sections to it. You've got an ADSR envelope here, function generator, LFO, and then this is this mix section, which we'll come on to a little bit later, which is very, very interesting. And this is labelled 1, 2 and 3, although up here it's sort of labelled A, F and L. So number 1 is the ADSR, A, number 2 is the function generator, F, number 3 is the LFO, L, and then this is the other thing. So that might sound incoherent, but honestly it isn't. It gets really easy really quickly. So let's just go through the basic functionality. ADSR at the top, just attack, decay, sustain, release. Let's try that out. Just going to patch it into VCA. Got it coming from the Arturia key step 37 over here. It's just putting in a bit of an arpeggiation. And you've got attack, decay, sustain, and then release. If I stop the arpeggiator, just have a little bit more of excitement over the whole envelope thing. There you go, hit long, and it goes for much longer. So lovely long envelopes are possible with this fella. And then we have loop mode. Loop mode is quite interesting because it uses these 2 sets of knobs slightly differently. It's like a sustain and release set the overall length of the loop, whereas attack and decay set sort of the shape of it. So as I put up the decay, I start to get more of a slope, more of a ramp, a down ramp, I suppose. As I bring up the attack, I then get a slope up. See how that's working? And it will go up to audio rate. One nicely playful feature is that you can actually turn the loop on and off from CV. So if I stick in the square wave from the LFO, that's now turning the loop on and off. Which can create all sorts of interesting things depending on what you're doing. It's also interesting that while you're holding a key, the loop doesn't activate even though it's on. It's not actually looping because I'm still gating the envelope. That only happens when I release. It's a looping ADSR envelope. What more can you say, really? Let's jump down to the second section, which is the function. Now this is that little bit more maths-like situation where instead of having an ADSR envelope, you've got attack, decay, or rise and fall, as you may find on other bits and pieces. This third knob dictates the curve, whether it's more linear or exponential or logarithmic. And then you've got some modulation, which we'll show you in a moment. But let's start off with a regular bit of envelope usage. So if I take the output of the function and put this into the input, I can use it like a regular AR envelope or attack decay envelope, AD envelope, and I can change the way that that responds. Now there is a sustain mode you can turn on, which therefore holds it for as long as the gate on whatever it is you're pumping into holds it on for. This is also loopable. Which depends precisely on the size of the attack and decay, like you would find on the maths. And with the function generator, it's not upset by any more other gates coming in. Like the ADSR, the gates tend to override the loop, whereas in this case, that's not the case. And then the last function is the modulation. You've got this modulation input here. So if I take the triangle output from the LFO that's built in, stick that into there, this will now start to modulate either the attack, or if I hit the button, it will then modulate the decay, or both. Or neither. The final feature of the function section is this trigger output here, which happens after the decay stage. So you can take this as like a delayed trigger for something else, or triggering another envelope, or triggering another event, and that happens whenever it hits to the end of the decay. And then at the bottom, as I say, you've got an LFO, which is just simple, turn it up to be faster, and you've got a triangle and a square output at the top. So let's stick all this together into a single patch to do something. So in this instance, I've got the ADSR controlling the volume envelope, and I've got the function controlling the Jove filter above it, and I've got the LFO modulating the attack. Which is putting in this kind of nice rhythm. This large knob here controls the amount of modulation of the parameter that you've selected. And that can either be positive or negative. business with the function generator is just fantastic. I mean, I really appreciate a simple envelope. An attack, decay, attack, release, rise, fall type envelope is something that really works for me. ADSR, yeah, that's good, that's lovely and all that sort of stuff, but really I end up using really just attack and release. And so this function here is just simplicity. You know, I know exactly what it's going to do, more or less, he says. But what makes this just so much fun is the fact that you can modulate these. You can stick control voltage into either the attack or the decay, and that creates this rhythm that, I mean, I'm just using this LFO here, it's not synced to anything, it's not running at the same time as anything else, you're just dialing it in and it's creating these interesting rhythms and this movement. That's just fabulous. And this is definitely my favourite combo of envelopes now, without a doubt. I mean, in fact, in some ways it's a shame that they're not normal to each other, so you can't trigger them from a single thing. I'm having to go through a mult here to give it two triggers, even though I'm triggering it at the same time. You can use this trigger here, which is the end of the decay, but why don't I try that while we're just thinking about it, if I can find a suitable cable. But then of course that's going to put the volume envelope behind. So yeah, that gives it a slightly weird, slightly different rhythm. There's just so many different ways you can go and push it. last section that we haven't looked at, which is this chunk of patch sockets here. Now these are associated with the 3 mix knobs at the bottom. The top 3 are inputs, won't worry about those for the moment. These bottom 4 are quite interesting. In 1 out, you get the output of the envelope, the same as you get here. In 2 out, you get the output of the function, same as you get there. With mix, you get the ADSR plus the function plus the LFO all tied up together. At the plus OR, you get some weird bit of logic, which means you only get the output of the thing that's the highest thing at the time when the time is the thing that's happening. So those are always fun. But essentially, you've got secondary outputs for every function. So what I'll do, I'll take the output of the function generator, which is going to the filter. If I plug that into out 1, what I should get is a copy of the ADSR going out to the filter. But the level of that is set by the mix knob here. Or I can also invert it. I can do the same with the second output, but this is going to have the function generator in it. Again, I need to turn it up. Or I can invert it. Out of the mix out, I get all 3, depending on what I've set here on their output knobs. So all sorts of things are possible from that output, and as I say, this does some strange logic thing. Where your guess is really as good as mine. Now these 3 inputs here along the top are just inputs, so you could plug in any sort of modulation from somewhere else if you fancy, like a bit of randomization into there. And that will mix in with the other contenders. So I'm no longer using this LFO. It's coming in from the Batumi over here. Or I could perhaps take the square rather than the triangle. But also it doesn't have to be CV in here, it could also be audio, and you can just use it as a simple attenuverting type mixing type audio thing. So the function junction then, that was just a very simple explanation, just showing you the basics of what it can do. Envelope, function, LFO, bit of interesting mixing and the possibility of blending waveforms, inverting waveforms, creating new forms of modulation, like I'm doing here. So yeah, it will do absolutely the simple stuff, but it will do interesting things too. And with this, I'm manipulating the size of the function, at the same time taking a mix of a couple of different modulators, the envelope and the function, out to the filter, while taking the trigger from the decay of the function out to step forward a sample and hold, which is sampling a piece of noise, which is throwing us out the melody. So as the function changes, as that expands and contracts, it's sending out fewer and more, greater and lesser amounts of triggers to the sample and hold, which is creating different notes, while at the same time affecting the filter, quite interestingly. So what I love about this is that I understand it. I understand what that bit does. I understand what this bit does. And this bit is a whole barrel of fun in here, this function business. Fabulous. I know what the LFO does. And I'm exploring and finding it really interesting in this kind of mixing weirdo section of producing all sorts of different bits and pieces. So it doesn't give me that bewilderment like something like the maths does. It's good, straightforward, but also creative and weird, but weird in a way where you're not going, oh, I just don't understand. It's weird in a way where you go, oh, right, that's quite interesting. Oh, yeah, let's have a play with that. And the fact that it can modulate itself so easily, makes that a lot of fun. So this is definitely a permanent resident in my case. First and foremost, because there's a couple of envelopes that I actually understand, and then it's got enough weirdness to be able to pepper my system with interesting bits and pieces. Function Junction is made by Cre8audio, who also gave us the nifty bundle, which is what they kicked off with. An interesting little Eurorack case with just enough room for some fascinating action. But more recently they've come out with the filter and also the Captain Big O oscillator, and they're getting increasingly creative and interesting, complex and fascinating, as well as remaining good value and kind of fun, engaging, exciting all at the same time. I mean, a lot of this I think comes from their collaboration with Pittsburgh Modular, who definitely do something about injecting an element of gravitas while still remaining hilarious, if you know what I mean. So I'm really excited to see what they come up with next, but this is definitely a keeper. And any of you out there who have never really understood what math is all about, don't worry about it. Sell it. Buy these. Buy this instead, and you'll be much happier for it. So I hope that was interesting, and if you're overwhelmed with interest, then do come and visit me on Patreon, where you can throw me a couple of dollars to help me keep making this kind of video, or just simply subscribe. That would be great. Tell your friends, share it about the place. Write some comments down the bottom about how awesome you think everything is in the world. And in the meantime, go and make some tunes.